Everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another Roll20 review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the marketplace section of online role-playing website Roll20.net. For this video, I'll be reviewing The Reach of Empire, which is the first module of the Against the Aeon Throne Adventure Path for Starfinder, designed by Paizo, and adapted by Roll20. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to my platinum patrons Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Crazy Pat, Nick, and Ribzung. And gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marcos de Vicente Gilberto, Sean aka Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, and Sam. Thank you all very much for your support. Now, full disclosure, I have limited knowledge of Starfinder. I reviewed the rulebook back when it came out, a few years ago now. I believe Against the Aeon Throne is the second adventure path. I think the first Starfinder adventure that has been adapted into Roll20. So I know of Starfinder, but I have not played through Starfinder, and it's been a while since I've even looked at the rule set. So just know that what you're getting and what I'm going into it with. But I'm still reviewing it as a module, as somebody that uses Roll20 all the time, and obviously as somebody that can comment on the story from a general tabletop RPG point of view. So what do you get with the Reach of Empire specifically, which is $22.99 in the Roll20 store? You get an adventure, of course, divided into 3 parts. This is specifically for levels. You start at level 1, you should reach level 2 about halfway through, and then get to level 3 by the end of the adventure. So we'll include that as a level 1 to 2 adventure. You get 4 5-foot battle maps with tokens and dynamic lighting all put into place. Dynamic lighting, of course, requires you to have either a Plus or Pro subscription to Roll20. You get 2 non-gridded maps for Nakadonis Colony and Madeline's Landing, which are the kind of overworld maps. You get 1 black hexagonal space map, which looks pretty cool. I'll show you that later. 1 alphabetized token page, 13 NPC character sheets with matching tokens and handouts, 2 unique named NPC character sheets with tokens and handouts, 10 starships with tokens and handouts. All of these, when I say handouts, by the way, I mean they all have pictures, and they have separate handouts that you can give to your players so that they have that artwork they can look at. 7 magic items, 8 pre-generated level 1 player characters, in case your players don't necessarily want to make their own characters, or just want to start with a template at first, as well as several supplemental rules, including the rules for building a starship. So any kind of rules that would be in the rulebook that are particularly relevant to this adventure are included here. So the background information on the Reach of Empire is that all of your player characters are tied together through 1 NPC named Sedona. She is a android that has befriended all of your players in some way, which I think is a really neat tie-in. It creates a personal thread that connects the player characters to the adventure itself, and you're even supposed to create it so that all of the player characters basically know this android character in some way, and every single one of the I believe these are called themes in Starfinder, they all have a way, no matter which theme you took, that you have a tie, some kind of connective tissue to this NPC. Now, this NPC doesn't actually factor into this adventure at all. What factors in is that she has gone to this colony in this remote forest planet and essentially could use everyone's help. And you all have a mission that you are bringing supplies there, and you figure, oh, well, we'll take this job, and then I'll go, surprise my old friend. And of course, it turns out that things are much more complicated there. At Nakadonis Colony, the Islani Star Empire has found a crashed ship that has a special rune drive in it from ancient times, and they are occupying the colony and just put everything under martial rule, all these poor colonists. The android friend that was your party's good friend went to research the drive, so they've captured her and the drive and shipped her back to basically their home system. None of that factors into this adventure. What factors in is that all of you arrive at this planet and you are embroiled in basically a rebellion, which is pretty cool. You get to this colony and essentially engage in kind of guerrilla warfare tactics. It is very combat heavy, but I do love that we get maps for every single encounter. So if you remember when I rattled off the maps, I only said you got like 4 battle maps, and there's actually a ton of encounters, but what they do is they put multiple maps onto one page. So while technically this is all one page, they'll actually include multiple encounters on there. It's all annotated, as you can see with this one, A, B, and C. So at the very beginning, you get on the planet. There's a brief spaceship battle with some drones, which cool. You get some starship battles. You land in the forest clearing, and you have a couple of encounters. And I really like the way these do encounters. So instead of doing pure random encounters, which say, hey, here's a table of encounters, just do whatever, and good luck trying to run that stuff. Instead, it gives you a series of scripted encounters, which is great because that means Roll20 can set up all these nice maps. You've got your dynamic lighting, obviously, so players are only playing on one corner of this map. And you've got all these tokens into place, and everything's set up perfectly. And it's up to you in terms of which order you want to run them, or even if you want to skip some of them or not. But I really love that this is the way that encounters are done, both for here in Part 1 as well as in Part 2. The most notable one in Part 1 is that you gain an ally, which is a fleeing member of the colony named Velik. And he introduces you to his ex-wife, who is the mechanic, and then she basically explains to all the player characters, please help us with our rebellion. Here's a list of things you can do to help us, and then that will help dismantle the Islani Star Empire, which is currently here, and then hopefully you can get back with your friend. So I like the plot thread is relatively simple and straightforward. It seems pretty easy to run for a DM, and easy for the players to kind of get caught up in having fun with it. So Part 2, which Madeline's Landing is part of this. It's actually in two maps, I believe. It's this map as well as on the other map, but it's very nicely annotated, and it's supposed to look this ugly. It's a bunch of shipping crates was just set down to make various buildings and homes as a way to create like a prefab colony almost. So not the most attractive colony, but it is what it is. You do have another map of the wider area, which is a really great map that honestly you don't even need because there's only two locations that are even used in this adventure, which is Madeline's Landing and then the Royal Venture crash site, which is the where Act 3 takes place. So it's a really impressive, gorgeous-looking overland map that you don't even need at all. You can land pretty much anywhere in your spaceship. And then you do like a couple encounters to get to Madeline's Landing, and then from there you just go on to the Royal Venture crash site. So, but really cool map. And I believe the Madeline's Landing is in this area too. Yeah, so here's the smaller version. And it's annotated nicely so you can see, let's see, Part 2. That's not the one. Where's Madeline's Landing? It should be down in here. Nekonis Colony. Right, or Nekondis Colony. There's a little typo there. Somewhere there's a typo. Here we go. So you can see where it's annotated, different areas where you can determine where all the locations are. There's a stables area where they have the hover bikes. There's a cemetery that's a shootout. There's a weird like trap that gathers all the local fauna, which are these monkey creatures that have like psychic beams. They have to gather them in a cage and then set them off somewhere because they don't want to inhumanely kill them all, I guess. And essentially Part 2 is doing a bunch of odd jobs around town, which is how a lot of these adventure paths tend to be structured. They give you a pretty linear Part 1 and Part 3, and then Part 2 usually opens up into kind of a city atmosphere and lets you explore and do your own thing, and it very much is the case here. And a lot of times you don't get maps for those things because there's small like one-off encounters. So I love the way this is done here, where it is still small one-off encounters, but we actually get little tiny maps for all these encounters, which is fantastic. It might be a little jarring because your characters, whenever they see it, are going to be looking at these kind of giant squares. Let's see if the thing is set up correctly on somebody like this. Yes. So this is what your players will see whenever they go to one of these maps. Everything will literally put out, and that doesn't actually look that bad now that I look at it. It's just kind of sectioned off into different areas like that. And I think that still looks good. It's still a big enough map, and then all the dynamic lighting pieces are on here for line of sight blocking, as well as creatures either on the GM layer or the token layer. Everything's already set up. It's got average hit points is on there, and then you've got handouts you can click on. This is all stuff where if you haven't bought something on Roll20 yet, this is the things that you get. There's the handouts, which you can show to your players. They don't see the entire sheet. If you haven't seen the Starfinder sheet yet, this is what it looks like. It is not the most attractive character sheet I've seen. Probably maybe borderline very, very unattractive. But it does a cool thing with the Roll20 chat box in that all of these turn into hyperlinks. So if you need to make an attack with your cadet guard, for example, it will whisper a menu to me, and then I can click one of these attacks. For example, I want to fire off the cadet's Imperial Pacification Rifle. I can click on that, hit submit, choose whether to do a full attack or not, and then that will roll the attack dice. I rolled a critical fail, excellent, as well as the damage. And right now, this is done as a whisper, which is defaulted to a whisper. So if you as a GM wanted to hide your rolls, you could do that. If you wanted to turn that off, then you will need to select public, and now it'll put, it'll still leave the menu in a whisper mode, I believe. Yes, and then you can click on that, and then it should appear as a public roll whenever you then click on that link. For some reason it's not clicking at the moment. Oh, Roll20 completely froze on me. There we go. It's catching up. Okay, let's try, there we go. Oh, I probably missed clicking on the little pop-up window. Okay, so we've got, and that's a public roll right there. And the same thing for saves, ability checks, scores, skills, all those things end up as little whispers, and you click it, and then it rolls it automatically in the chat box, which is very, very cool. I like that sheet a lot. Makes it pretty easy for GMs to run whatever you need to do just by clicking that and having it appear in the chat box. Very cool. Yep, there's all the times I clicked it. I forgot that. Stupid pop-up box. I had like 8 of those. And then dungeons, let's see, where's my character? Look like this. So you can see all the doors correctly laid out with dynamic lighting. Looks very cool. And the way dynamic lighting works, you go to that list and then you can open doors by simply clicking on any of these doorways, slide it open, literally like a little MS Paint dot, and then you can see the door opens and you can waltz right in. Boom. Very cool. So I like the way part 2 is set up because that we get these maps. So there's a part where your buddy that you saved earlier that you're supposed to be getting friends with becomes captured and is going to be executed, so you have to fight off the guards. There's a shootout, as I said, in the cemetery. There's a scene where you can go investigate what's going on with the water purifier, and it turns out there's a water elemental stuck in there, which you can, if you have somebody that can speak Aquan, or if you've enlisted the aid of one of the other rebels who can speak Aquan, then you can possibly get out of that encounter. All of these encounters, I will say, are very, very combat heavy. There are very few that do not involve combat at all. Oops, let me check that. But for the most part, I think they're pretty enjoyable. And you know, when you're doing these kind of sabotaging things, they are going to be hostile for the most part. The only one that I believe is explicitly not is these two, Storehouse Roos and the Administrator's Office. Neither of them have maps because one of them you're just talking to somebody essentially, and the other one you're exploring a completely empty area that just has like 1 or 2 traps in it was the only thing. So neither of those actually have any kind of maps because they really didn't need it. Part 2 ends with a mini dungeon crawl as you go after the garrison and kind of fight a mini boss here with Alarja. My one complaint with this adventure is that it kind of lacks that fun alien exoticism that I was looking forward to with Starfinder, with, you know, cool space shit and cool alien shit. This one, it feels almost a little mundane. Like, I do like the theme and setup of you helping rebels, like, you know, kick off the Imperial space fascist D-bags of the Islani Star Empire. That's enjoyable, but you are basically just fighting a series of stormtroopers all the time, which are these cadets, which is pretty funny because obviously it's a level 1 and 2 adventure. You're not very high level, so you're fighting like the lowest rung of the of the Aeon Guard here. So it's just not quite as exciting, and you're on the planet the whole time. There's not a lot of cool exotic alien life here. There's the monkeys are pretty much the only other thing. There's a worm. At one point you fight outside of the starship, and there's a couple of those electrovires, which are, I think, pretty common in this universe. They're like flying snakes that go after electricity. It just kind of lacks any kind of cool big monsters or interesting exotic alien stuff. You're just kind of fighting just dudes the whole time, pretty much. Act 3 then goes into the Royal Venture crash site when you finally learn you basically solved the colony's immediate problems, and you learn that that hopefully your android friend is here at the crash site along with the boss of this current group, which is in the crash site. This is a really cool map. If you can't tell, you can tell this is a spaceship that has been crunched, like just, you know, bent kind of in a corner there. It's a really, really neat looking map. it's just neat because for so long I've been looking at fantasy maps that have the usual fantasy trappings of tables and chairs and treasure chests and all these things. So it's funny seeing like just tables and chairs and bathrooms and indoor plumbing and these kind of things, and it all looks really well here. So it's well done, and the scorch marks and the cracked floors and everything. This is a really nice looking map, and really serves as a pretty fun dungeon crawl. You've got the worm out here, the electrovirus in here, so a little bit of monsters. There's some zombies in here because when it crashed, it apparently made some zombies because it was a runic drive. There's a robot that thinks it's still just days since the servant was last, or the boss of the ship was last in here, so he still thinks everything's all hunky-dory. There's a shootout with some guards, and it basically ends with another shootout with the boss. So I think it's a fun little dungeon crawl. There's not, a whole lot going on, but I really enjoy the map and the design here. And then it ends with a big ship coming into orbit that your players have to hightail it back to their ship, go up and fight this kind of climactic space battle to really end the adventure. And they've gotten some intel off of the boss that they defeat here, as well as from freeing the colony, that their trail will then lead them deeper into the campaign and continuing on the adventure path. So I think it's pretty enjoyable. I wasn't blown away by this adventure. Now it is a level 1 adventure, so I do accept that in terms of how much the adventure can throw at us. I was a little disappointed the fact that there are so few creatures relatively here, and it's a whole lot of just reusing the same Aeon guards over and over and over again, essentially. But it's pretty easy to run, and I like that all the encounters are mapped, and all the maps look pretty good. So I think it's a pretty good thumbs up in terms of the content that we get here, and it seems like it would be a pretty decent start for a Starfinder adventure. If you want to look real quick at the... Oh, I need to show the... Let's see. We do get a map of a starship, which is interesting because it's a fantastic map. This looks absolutely amazing. A really cool starship map, and it's really not even used. Like, I believe this is the ship that comes in at the very end that you have to fight, and it's more about using the actual star map than using this map. But I guess if you wanted to board this ship or do something, you could actually throw tokens on here and battle it out in this map, because it's a really cool looking map. But otherwise, you don't really even need it. This is the actual blank space map that you would use, and you could drag the starships onto there, which would be like, say, the Vanguard Void Sweeper. Can go right here, and it's an actual hexagon map. And I think, for a blank map, this looks pretty cool. It's like a little Starfield map, and it's got the, little stars everywhere, and the hexes all look pretty good. So you can see the size difference in some of the ships looks pretty nifty as well. So I think that's a neat little map right there. And then the token page, which this is pretty common standard now for all the Roll20 marketplace stuff. And you saw, you can just drag whatever you need from this onto from the actual journal. What is this called? Yeah, the journal. You can drag this onto the grid map, and it instantly populates it with the matching token, which already has the hit points and the character sheet and everything tied to it. So that's the easiest way to do it. For some reason, if you just wanted to copy and paste individual tokens, you can do that from this page. You can literally just click whatever you want, Control-C, go to the page, click where you want, Control-V, and it will give you a token that you need from there. I do think this one's useful for giving you an actual visual glance and see how big tokens are, because some of them are obviously quite bigger than others and more impressive, but we also get tokens of a lot of NPCs, but honestly, and you might balk at the fact that a lot of these don't have names, which is usually a problem I have in a lot of Roll20 purchases, because there's a lot of NPCs that aren't given official pictures from the text, and thus Roll20 doesn't just, provide new pictures. But in this case, almost none of them should be on battle maps. They're all just people that, it would be nice to have as handouts, but they're just people that the players are talking to, with the exception of the two kind of, the mini-boss, Alaraja, and the head boss, Lieutenant Sharu, at the very end, obviously have tokens because they're on the battlefield. And then Jellic is the actual person that you're saving twice, I believe. His dumbass gets into trouble quite a few times. But yeah, pretty good little adventure. Pros and cons for the Reach of Empire. Full color battle maps for every single encounter. Yes, 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 please. More like this, please, that have these little... this little like montage mix of mini maps for all the encounters is a wonderful solution to the problem I usually have with these Pathfinder adventures, in that they don't give you enough maps for all the various little mini encounters that occur. So this is, I think, a really, really great solution to that. Pro, a fun theme of joining a rebellion and instigating guerrilla tactics. I do enjoy the fact that you get to join up with the plucky rebellion, kind of a very Star Wars tone to it. Maybe a little darker than that, but and you're fighting back against the occupying empire and rescuing people, and that's pretty cool. Pro, a dungeon crawl through a crashed ancient ship. I think part 3 goes off pretty good. It's not my most favorite dungeon. It's not a particularly super clever dungeon design. It's very short, but I think it looks really good and it serves its purpose in providing a little bit of a cool dungeon crawl flavor. Cons, the adventure lacks the alien exoticism that I was really hoping for, kind of a more sci-fi flavor. You do get the ship battles at the beginning and the end, but from there you're just on a colony and you're just kind of fighting a bunch of generic stormtrooper type people, which is fine, but it doesn't have a lot of cool alien or sci-fi stuff, so I'm hoping we get more of that as we kind of level up and get further along this adventure path. And con is relatively few monsters and magic items for one of these adventures, and I don't know if that's just a consequence of Starfinder obviously having less magic items. It's more about the tech, but especially in monsters, and I mentioned that it reuses a lot of those same Aeon Guard cadets over and over again for every kind of enemy, so it does reuse the same few enemies. Hobguards are reused a couple times rather than providing a bunch of new and interesting threats, so that's a little bit of a bummer and more limiting. Final verdict, The Reach of Empire is a solid, easy to run starting adventure module and a decent introduction to Starfinder. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. And you can follow our own adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.